You're listening to Transformation at Work, your one-stop guide to Salesforce success. And this is Project Rewind, expert insights and industry perspectives on what digitalization and Salesforce success look like in action. Today we're digging into the world of experience design and sitting down with two members of our Gerent Experience team.
Jim Corcoran, Experience Director.
Marissa Holliday, I am an Experience Strategist.
To talk through the question of, well, how do you design a digital experience? And going further, how do you meaningfully transform that experience to create something that is effortless, personalized, and truly delightful to interact with, whether you are a user, a customer, an employee, a partner? It's a difficult proposition at times, especially because, as we discussed in our previous episode with Gordon Forsyth, Gerent Experience's practice lead, good experience design is often a little bit of an invisible art form. When experience design is working as intended, whether that's user, customer, employee, partner experience, you often don't notice it's happening, and that's really the point, which can make designing these kinds of experiences a challenge. Side note, if you'd like to hear more about that topic, you can find a link to that episode in the show notes. A perfect example of this that illustrates the kind of iceberg effect of experience design, as Jim breaks down here, is the idea of going out to eat in a restaurant, and all of the little decisions that go into your night out that you never really notice until you really stop to pay attention.
If you think of a restaurant, you're sitting at a table, the kitchen in the background that you can't see what's going on backstage, so to speak. There's a lot of processes going on, a lot of equipment, a lot of people that are working to create the meal for you. You never really meet any of them. You never really see any of them. The waiter brings out the food. And so your experience is really about the front of the house where you're in the restaurant, you're eating the food, you're interacting with the waiter and the maitre d' and all of the ambiance of the restaurant, but you're also, you're directly affected by what happens in the back of the kitchen. And some of the things that are indirectly happening in the back of the kitchen, let's say the freezer goes on the fritz and they have to run out to get food and your order is delayed or something like that. Those kinds of things affect you as well. So we look at that whole picture from the beginning, because if we're really looking to fix or optimize someone's experience, all of that stuff matters.
That's why having a truly holistic understanding of your organization's experience from top to bottom for both internal and external users is so crucial. It gives you an acute understanding of all of the invisible decisions that go into an effective experience and how they interconnect with one another, so you can make adjustments as needed on the fly. But in today's increasingly hybrid landscapes where digital and physical are meeting in more spots than ever, gaining that understanding can be a tricky process.
We work in a lot of digital products and services, but in today's world, there's a lot of touch points that are physical and digital. So if you've ever gotten like DoorDash, right, there's all sorts of digital and physical touch points that are happening potentially, whether you're picking up or getting a delivery, between physically coming into contact with the organization and or digitally coming into contact with the organization. If you call them, if you email them, if you chat with them, all of those are different kinds of touch points.
All of which brings us back to that core question of, how do you get there as an organization? How do you build that kind of seamless, delightful experience in the digital space? That's where the process of working with a qualified design partner begins. And it starts with a careful analysis of your organization's goals, your pain points, and what you truly want for that end user experience.
We start with things like problem space and vision. So that's in order to help us kind of create a shared understanding and cross-functional alignment and strategies. Running these workshops with key investors or, key client members really helps us to get a good understanding from the jump of like, what are my problems and what does success look like, right? If we solve these problems, what's our vision? Where are we in X amount of time, right? In order to make meaningful change in someone's life, whether they're using a product or really with anything, you need to know who they are. So research helps us a ton with that.
That level of research and that initial investigation serves a pretty crucial purpose in kickstarting the experience design journey, because it provides a boots-on-the-ground perspective on what the organization is hoping to get out of the project. And that's invaluable from an employee perspective, but it's also only half of the equation. As Jim breaks down here, the next vital step is understanding not just what the organization wants, but what the customer wants out of the experience being designed.
We can do one-on-one interviews with people who fit a persona group, which is really just a group of people who have like characteristics, right? So let's say we have a particular product or service. We have a particular set of customers or users that are the targets for that product or service. We can do one-on-one in-depth interviews with them called IDIs, where we would have an hour conversation using a semi-structured interview where we'd have particular questions we want to ask them. And then the interview could also drill down into those details. And then we come up with a fairly comprehensive report that have, fancy things like qualitative verbatims, which is just like a fancy way of saying quotes from direct customers and insights. And those are extremely powerful when you want to get down into making that change in someone's life.
Now, another critical piece of this initial research, this work that goes into experience design that's all happening before the first drop-down menu or button is built, is understanding not just what the customer, the end user, is looking for, and not just the technical requirements of what is needed to build that, but crucially, also what else is happening in the larger industry and how competitors' decisions might impact what end users are expecting out of design.
We have quite a few methods that we use, so anything from competitive analysis. What are other people doing to get these people in the door, using their product, understanding them? Things like focus groups, right? Talking to the customers, asking them specific questions, right? Getting a better understanding of who they are, what they want, what does success look like for them, one-on-one interviews it could be. So anything like that really helps us get that understanding. And it's, the tools that we use to understand them better.
Now, all of this work, this critical research into understanding how to deliver the best experience possible, that's invaluable, but it can also be costly and time-consuming. And as Jim breaks down here, there are often scenarios where that kind of investment in terms of both money and time isn't necessarily an option.
Sometimes you might have budget constraints. Sometimes you might have time constraints. Sometimes customers might be reticent to have you speak to the end customer.
In those cases, how do you unlock the value of that initial investigation while minimizing some of those required investments? The answer often comes in the form of what is called a proto-persona exercise.
What a proto-persona exercise basically looks like is we'll get proxies for customers, so people who are on the front lines. People who do sales are often people who come into contact with customers frequently. People who do customer service come into contact with customers frequently. And so we'll gather a bunch of those people in a room and kind of tell them, hey, put yourself in the customer's shoes as best that you can for this particular situation or product or service, and let us know, when customers, use this product or come to this website or interact with this service, what are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they, need to accomplish those goals? And are there any pain points or obstacles that are getting in their way? And are there any kind of key characteristics to these types of customers that we might be beneficial for us to know before we design something for them? And whereas the first research project could take, a couple of months to complete, something like a proto-persona workshop can take a couple of hours to complete.
Whether a design partner is working with an organization on a quick and simple proto-persona exercise or a longer, more involved investigation, the goal of all of this initial research is the same: learning the organization's goals, the end user's needs, and the things that need to happen for those two pieces to meet.
There's two kinds of understanding. There's the organizational view of the customer, so the inside out view, which is what we're talking with the proto-persona, which is always good to understand. And then there's the outside in view, which is the actual customer's point of view. And so, we find, depending on the needs of a project and the needs of a client, both of those routes for understanding, which is the foundation before you start putting buttons and drop downs and sliders into pages and components and widgets, that you really need to know about who it is you're designing for first. And that could go for partners. It could go for employees. It could go for any human being that's out there, finding out about them in these different ways.
Now, with all of that initial research done, it's time to design the experience. And as Marissa breaks down here, that means it's time to bring in the internal and external teams that are going to be responsible for actually building those pieces of the puzzle in real time.
Something that I like to try to do as often as we can is like get the dev team, the dev side involved as early as possible, right? To kind of say like, here's what we're thinking. How possible is this? Because sometimes we can kind of be a little more blue sky and thinking outside the box. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's all good and well, but can the developers develop what we're designing?
Like Marissa just said, getting them in early. The design process is not like some silo where we go off into our experience lab and do our thing and then bring it back to everybody. We really try to involve a cross-functional team so that those constraints can be surfaced. And, you get a lot of really awesome ideas from all sorts of people with all sorts of different backgrounds on how we can solve this customer's problem or meet their need or, take advantage of this opportunity.
As vital as it is to have dev in the room, they're rarely the only voices that need to weigh in on given experience decisions. And so, as Marissa breaks down here, oftentimes what is required is what is called solution siloing, bringing multiple voices to the table and ensuring that everyone gets to weigh in on the finished product.
That process for us is super fun, right? We get a cross-functional team together to come up with ideas. It's a fun and relatively quick way to kind of come to a solution, and not just from the point of view from us as experience strategists, but what do the developers think, right? What do business analysts think? We don't all think the same. So to hear their inputs and come up with a solution from them really helps us kind of get an all encompassing, like best solution that we can kind of put forward.
And from there, well, building is underway. Now, you might think that process, designing this experience, is a one-and-done procedure, but the reality is it's really more of an ongoing push-and-pull affair. It's not just one change. It's a series of dozens of smaller changes often made in conversation with one another and in conversation with the customer's particular needs, as Marissa and Jim break down here.
And then when it gets time for prototyping, actually experiencing what it's like, and as the person who's going to be using this, how does it work? You might think, oh yeah, we have this great idea. And you might have thought that you covered all the one-off chances and the nuances that might come up. And then you build it and you try to use it. And then you realize, oh yeah, this is perfect. Or, oh wait, actually, this might be able to be tweaked to make this experience even better for the end users.
Even though you try to eliminate as much as you can, as you go down the road, to Marissa's point, there's things that are going to pop up. And then it's like, okay, well, how can we, advocate for the customer and balance that between maybe some technical constraints or some timeline issue that has come up or whatever the thing might be. How do we balance all the different components so that we have the best possible experience under the given set of circumstances?
And then once this work gets underway and these iterative changes start being made, that is where that initial envisioning work becomes really, really crucial. Because those key learnings are going to act as the foundation that both the organization and the design partner return back to again and again throughout the process.
Even once a project starts going, like really kind of thinking back to that vision, right? Is what we're designing and what we're creating and what we're developing speaking to that vision, right? What they said, what success would look like in the future. So I think especially for like Jim and I and our team, we are there through like the length of the project to really make sure we keep asking ourselves, okay, here's what we designed. Does it speak to this vision, right? Is this what is going to be successful for this organization that we kind of created this for? Things change as we kind of go through it. What we initially designed may change once we get to development or different stages of the project. So it's important to have some experienced strategist or experienced representation throughout the length of the project. That way you kind of have somebody there speaking for that organization or that person that you are designing this for, to kind of keep them in mind and just say, okay, if we need to pivot, no problem. But how do we still make it the best experience that we can make it for whoever we're designing for?
You put yourself in the user's shoes as best you can and kind of say, oh, maybe I'd like to do this, or how do I get back from here, or what are my choices, or there's too many options here or not enough options, etc. And then you test it with actual users, and it's pretty amazing, having done this for a long time, and we put a lot of best practices into things. but you really need a certain degree of humility and really understanding that you got to leave room for not knowing, because it's always surprising when you watch people work with what you've built, the things that you actually learn. And I think that's another thing about this too, is making evidence-based decisions based on what you learn, because like I said, best practices are awesome. Certain things work because they're proven to work that way. We certainly stand on the shoulders of organizations that do a lot of testing and research that we can't do because of the scale. So we kind of stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Now, the goal of all this iteration is pretty simple. Ensure that no matter what changes are being made and what decisions are being implemented, that the experience being built is constantly trending towards the organization's metrics for success and what the end user needs out of the process.
What does success look like for this organization or this person? And seeing that what's actually being developed kind of makes sense for this person. Again, we may have to pivot at some times or kind of reevaluate, come up with a different design. As Jim mentioned and I have mentioned, once you get prototyping, you kind of see it working and say, ooh, maybe it could kind of be like this, or maybe this pop out needs to not do that. So a lot of different things may come up. And in order for them to kind of have that seamless experience, it's important for somebody from the experience side to be there throughout the entirety of the project, just to kind of make sure we're keeping that in mind.
Which brings us eventually to the post-design phase. The major development work has been completed, the experience has been built, the process is theoretically complete. By working closely together and doing the right research up front to know the best design decisions to make, the organization and design partner have built an experience that serves their needs and delights the end user. But, as Marissa breaks down here, that work isn't yet completed. Now, it's time to test, and make sure that everything is working as intended.
We test, measure, and learn, so it's all outcome driven. So again, it's important to, if possible, get a prototype in front of users or people that are going to be using this and say, all right, let's kind of test this out and see, does it work the way that we thought it would? Are they using it the way that we thought they would? Because once you kind of get it in to somebody's hands, you see, oh, all right, I see. They're missing this whole section here. Their eye's not going there, right? So how do we reevaluate and come up with a different way to show them that? So we're always kind of refining if we need to. Hopefully we don't need a lot of refining, right? Hopefully what we had from the beginning tests true and makes sense. But, there's always edge cases and things like that we really need to account for. So we're always trying to test, measure, and learn, what's best for this users.
And if everything at this point goes according to plan, there are no hiccups in the process, there are no changes that need to be made, the end result of all of that work from the initial ideation through development into final testing is pretty profound. It is a truly revitalized experience that delivers real change for the organization.
That's what an outcome really is, right? Something in the world is one way, and then it changes in some fashion, and we are the entity that causes that change, or the product or service that we're generating causes that change. And when it comes to outcomes, we're looking really at two primary outcomes that we're trying to create. One is for an individual, so the person that we're designing our product or service to serve that person. And so we want to have an outcome or a beneficial change in their lives. So, who are they? How do we want to change their lives exactly? How do we intend to do that? And what's the value? What's the benefit to them? And then the second piece would be, the business objective. So what's the real world change that we want to make in the business? And how will we know that change has happened, and how will that impact the business objective? So it's really starting from those before we ever even start talking about, well, what is the digital product or service itself? It's really just understanding what do we want to do and kind of starting from the end, starting from the successful change in the world and how we can measure that to know that it's happened, and then tracing that back to how we're going to create an experience for that particular person that accomplishes all of those things.
And that is transformation at work. This has been Transformation at Work. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you once again to Jim and Marissa for some really keen insights into their process from beginning to end. Transformation at Work is, as always, produced by Gerent in collaboration with Salesforce. I am Jeff Stormer, your host and producer. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify, or head to gerent.com to sign up for email updates when we release new episodes. Until next time, thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.